Hey there, Pyre Crew, and welcome back for our 5th video. Today we are going to be talking about feathering. Now, feathering is the term that I use for it. There's a lot of different names for it, but essentially the core principles of this technique remain the same throughout a variety of techniques. And so let's go ahead and jump in and start to talk about this technique. What are the pros? It's super fast. What are the cons? It's not always the most precise, and so it can take a little bit of glazing and perhaps even a little bit of layering to clean it up if we're still getting used to the technique. So what is the technique? You lay down some paint, and then with a slow moving zigzagging motion away from that pile of paint, you begin to drag the paint out in order to create transparency, which is another fancy word for a blend. Now, there are a number of varieties of doing this, and here's what those 3 varieties are. The first one is where we pick just the right amount of paint, we set it down, and then we move it away. The second one is we set the paint down, we clean the brush very quickly, and then we return to feather that out. The third one, which you guys may know as 2-brush blending, is where you place the paint, you have a second damp brush on hand that you then use to feather it out. Now, are any of these better than the other? No. It's entirely based upon personal preference. You are going to discover which one you like the most. For me personally, I like the first 2. I don't like having an extra tool. For the guys that work for P3 and many other painters, they love the 2-brush method because they feel as though it gives them the most control over what they're doing. So we're going to show you all 3 of those techniques today because I think that all 3 are valuable pieces of information, valuable tools to have in your tool shed. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump on over to the table and hop right into it, guys. Today what we are going to be doing is talking about a technique, as we talked about in the intro, that I like to call feathering. Now, I'm going to be showing you those 3 different variants, and I'm going to be showing you essentially how we can create very fast highlights and shadows. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to talk about first. The first is that we don't need a lot of paint to create a highlight or a shadow. The second is that larger brushes in general for this technique tend to work a little bit more in our favor. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the first technique. So the first technique is when we load a little bit of paint on the brush. What we want to do is we want to set this tip down and also lay the brush down so that it's impacting this. And as you can see, if I do this and then I angle it towards the light, you can see how the back of the brush deposits a little bit of liquid. Now that you guys have seen that, we will go ahead and continue to execute the rest of the technique. So we're going to lay this brush down and slowly, with a zigzagging motion, we're going to draw this paint out into a transition. Now I'm doing this very slowly so that you can see. And I'm going to go ahead and do it one more time. We're going to set the paint down with the brush also on its side, and very slowly, in a zigzagging motion, we are going to draw the paint out. We can also push the paint back in and then draw it out again if we're not completely content with it. Now, the speed at which you do it isn't incredibly important. The main thing though is that you need to be careful with how you are drawing it out. That is the first method, and as you can see, we create very nice little soft transitions. They're not perfect though. We can still see some of the zigzagging in there. And of course, this is very big. We're not trying to cover the whole base all in one go. The next technique is one where we place the paint and then clean the brush very quickly. I clean it with my mouth. And recent studies have shown that there's actually very little or no risk in consuming this type of food grade safe acrylic paint. So don't worry about licking the brush. If it grosses you out though, you don't have to do it. You can also use like a wet rag or a sponge or something like that to do this. So I'm going to place the paint, clean the brush, come back, push into it, and then I'm going to, again in a zigzagging motion, pull the paint out. Just like that. So again, very simple, very effective, not a ton of fuss, and we have a transition. So the next technique that I'm going to use is what is commonly referred to as the two-brush blending method. So this is still a variant of feathering, and I've had people debate me on that, but the technique at its core is still very much the same. But with the small brush, we're going to place the paint. With the large brush, we are going to draw the paint out. Now, the reason why we're using the small brush to place the paint is that we have more accuracy. The reason why we're using the large brush to pull it out is that we have more control over the amount of paint that we soak up and the amount of liquid that we place down. And that's why this technique is preferred over those first two methods. Just like that. There you go. Those are the three techniques at which we would want to do feathering. It's a very non-complicated technique. There really isn't much more to explain other than that. And essentially, if you are kind of wondering why it's so short, it's because mechanically there's just not a lot going on other than that. It's very different than layering, where it's kind of a continual effect. I guess what we can talk about here is why would you want to use this technique over something like layering. So it's very, very brute force. You can create a lot of contrast very, very quickly with this technique. What's the downside to it? There's not a lot of nuance to it. If we would mix green with this highlight color and gradually work up to it, we would get a lot more tonal variation, meaning a lot more of a variety of colors as we mix it up. And again, this technique though is compatible with glazing. So if we want to shift these colors to being a little bit more green, we can thin down some green here on our palette and we can glaze over these and it will shift it a little bit more green. We can also do fun things, like we have this yellow-green mix here on the palette. We can use some of this, and this will make our highlights even more intense. Glazes are how you get tonal variation with feathering, as opposed to how you naturally would with the layering techniques. So that is really it, you guys. It's as simple as that. Again, placing the paint down, making sure that the back end of the brush is also touching, not just the tip where the paint is, so that you create that damp zone. So when you're zigzagging back into that zone, you can evenly and gently disperse that paint in a gradual way to create a transition, as we have here. So this video is probably going to be one of the shorter ones. I would love to see photos of you guys using this technique and the miniatures that you use them on down in the comments. I want to see those whips. And then also, if you guys have any questions for me at all, please feel free to message me and let me know, as I want to make sure that I answer all of those questions for you. If you have been enjoying this series of basics tutorials, please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1. If you support me at $5 though, you get access to a treasure trove of tutorial content and 30 hours of it. There's just a wealth of knowledge in there, everything from NMM, TMM, you think of it, we probably have a tutorial for it. Thank you guys again so much though for the support that you give me every single day, and watching these videos, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day and happy painting. Bye.